If you've ever asked the universe for some kind of sign and got it clear as day, what was it and how did it go? When my mom died, I was pretty destroyed. We were very close. I was feeling like I couldn't understand how to live in the world without her. One day I was driving home from work, depressed as hell, and I started thinking how much I'd love it if I could get a sign from her, surprising myself a bit. As I'm not at all religious, and am highly skeptical about things like signs from the universe, but I missed her so much that I mentally asked the universe for a sign. She really loved birds, so I thought, wouldn't it be cool if it came in the form of a bird, maybe a sparrow or even a pigeon or something. I got home, parked my car, and walked up the path to the cottage I was renting. This was in the city of Berkeley, CA. As I was unlocking the front door, off to the side a flash of color caught my eye. I turned to look, and it was a Chinese pheasant. I had no idea what it was. I had to look it up, but if you Google Chinese pheasants, you'll see why I was so blown away. It was brilliantly colored, with gold on its head and back, orange and black bars on its neck, bright red chest and blue on its wings, the most psychedelic bird I've ever seen. And it was standing on my front porch, a bird native to Ducking, China. I had no clue how the hell it could even be there. I thought I had to be dreaming, so I got my neighbor to come see it. We stared at it with our jaws hanging open, then it sort of squawked and flew away. And it hit me that I had asked my mom the universe for a sign, thinking maybe a drab little sparrow or a pigeon. And what I got was a bird that was ridiculously over the top, and it was exactly the kind of joke my mom would have loved. I'm still skeptical and not religious and don't believe in fairies and shit, but that was weird, and also great. I was in the depths of despair. I had lost my great job, had to travel 2 hours every day with heavy tools each way to a temporary job I was doing, sitting on the bus, thinking my world was over, and it all kind of got to me all at once and I began to tear up. Not wanting to bawl my eyes out in public, I held it in. So I asked for something, anything that could show me that life wasn't worthless. A lady I didn't see must have how bad I was, or maybe it was just coincidence, but just after I cried out in my head, I heard the words, "Everything is going to be okay." It saved my life. Edit. I had no idea that this would affect you all so much. Sometimes it might be dark and a small spark starts a fire. Sometimes you're the small spark. Be the change you want to see in the world. Thank you for the awards too. I can now give awards to others. Similar story. Stuck in a horrific job, eating myself to death at McDonald's. I was having a particularly shitty day and my boss had screamed at me and the other technicians over something that she, the boss, had ducked up. I must have been looking extra miserable because this little old lady comes in. She notices me sitting at a table alone and smiles. She simply says, "Hey, don't let them win." It cut to my core. How could she know my fight? It's like she saw right through my defenses and nailed my ducking situation. A little while later she was leaving with her food and she smiled again and said, "Have a nice day," and I smiled back and told her, "Thank you. You too." So that's been my mantra ever since, don't let them win. It's simple but it got me out of that shitty situation. I'm not superstitious at all, but my uncle is. When my nan passed, he went to see a fortune teller who told him that anytime our family sees white feathers around, that's nan's way of showing us that she's there. I thought it was a load of bullshit and forgot about it. A few years later I was at a music festival. Everything was coated in dirt and dust being churned up by thousands of people's feet. Even the air was so thick with dust it was making it hard to see and breathe. I was on the edges of the mosh pit when I started to have my first panic attack. I'd never had one before, didn't know what was happening to me, and I was terrified. I felt like I was being crushed and like I was the only person in the world at the same time. I remember desperately thinking, I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be here alone. I crouched down in the middle of the dirty dusty crown, and when I opened my eyes there was a single white feather on the ground right between my feet. It was perfectly white, no dirt, not stepped on or anything in a mosh pit. I stared at the feather until I could get my breathing under control and get out of there, and I still have that feather. But are you a little stitious? All my life, whenever I went to the beach I had wanted to find an intact sand dollar. I had found lots of pieces, but never a whole one. When I was in my mid-30s, I went with a group of friends to the coast. I was walking alone along the beach in the moonlight close to midnight. I was feeling very sorry for myself in the dark, and really lonely, even though I was with my friends that weekend. I had just started thinking the thought, wouldn't it be a great sign right now to know that I'm loved if I finally found a sand dollar? I had barely formed the thought when I looked down, and right at my feet was an intact sand dollar. Universe told your insecurities, I'm gonna pay you one sand dollar to duck off. I had gotten a job at a retail store and went in for the orientation and to-do training. The vibe was kind of off in the store, but I ignored it. I got to the back where the computers were but couldn't shake the feeling of being uncomfortable. In my head I said, alright universe, if I'm not meant to work here, show me some kind of sign. Make them send me home for the day or something. About an hour later, a huge storm rolled in and shut off the power in the store. The manager came in and said for me to go home since their computers weren't working and I couldn't do my training. A couple months later and I was working at a new job that I absolutely loved. My wife and I had been considering getting a second cat for some time without reaching any conclusion. Then, as I was walking back to the apartment one evening, a young feline popped up out of the drainage beside the sidewalk. Basically, he just looked at me and said, let's cut to the chase. I'll be moving in with you now. You need a cat. I am a very cute, completely adorable kitten. The only problem I see here is that you might not be smart enough to recognize this opportunity. Be your best self right now, dude. So I looked at him and said, I can't make this decision solo. Let me go get the wife. He just looked at me and nodded his head like go on, I'll wait. Considering that she just decided that today was cat bath day, he may be regretting the decision, but I'm completely okay with the way things have gone over the past years. I loved every minute of this story. I got home from my best friend's funeral, the whole time sitting in the funeral home asking him or God for a sign. When I got home I turned on the TV and his favorite song was playing on Much Music. I decided to kill myself about the age of 13. Life sucked, and I planned to go home from church that night and off myself if there was no direct intervention. Out of nowhere my aunt stopped me and said I feel like you need to come home with me. And I'm still here. Damn B. I was looking up at the night sky and said Dad show me a shooting star and one shot across the sky. He had passed a few years earlier, and it was purely coincidental but I really needed it at the time. Once while walking to work as a teenager I asked God to show me a sign if I should get out of my relationship abusive ex. And just as I finished the prayer a fish came flying out of nowhere and smacked me in the face. I went down and blacked out for a second and when I came to there were these three hillbilly men surrounding me, fanning me, and just generally freaking out. When they realized I was awake they just started apologizing and said they swore they had put the strap on their cooler. They gave me some ice for my eye and walked me down to work so I could call my mom to pick me up. I broke up with my ex the next day out of fear of being smacked by a rogue fish again. I have no idea if this is even true but girl this is the funniest shit I've read all week. You are a hell of a writer. I'd been unhappy in my line of work for some time. I had been reading some self-help books. I am not religious. Called Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. It talked about the universe reflecting your thoughts, words and actions directly back at you. That is wanting a career change results in a reality of wanting a career change. There was a message about being and not doing. So I wanted to test this with an experiment, as it all sounded a bit mumbo jumbo. So I volunteered in a special needs youth club, so I could be and give what I wanted the universe to reflect back at me. This led to a job as a support worker for special needs in a college, which led to completing a distance learning degree, which led to teacher training, which led to being a graduate lecturer, which led to deputy management of a whole faculty and ultimately a career helping 100s of people each year. I have continued to practice this creating your own reality philosophy of being through thoughts, speech and actions. The number of times it works cannot be just luck. Believing in luck is just as far-fetched if you really think about it. I asked God for a sign while I was at church. A sign fell off the wall at my feet. When I was a teenager, I had bad problems with depression and anxiety that led to very self-destructive behavior. There were many times I imagined killing myself, and one night I was set on doing it. Came home drunk and sad and started cutting myself, which was one of my methods for dealing with my emotions. I sat in my bed crying, trying to find the courage to cut deeper and end it. Then my dog Snoopy hopped up on the bed and put his head on my lap. Thanks to him doing that, I realized that I just couldn't do that to him or to my parents and friends. He saved my life that night. The next day I decided to open up to my parents and ask them to help me find some help, which was a huge step forward. Starting seeing a therapist, and she really helped me work through a lot of things. Still struggle a bit sometimes, but I'm able to manage thanks to the help I received, and I credit that little lovable mutt for me being around today. I was on a mission trip in Central America when I was a teenager with my dad. He didn't know, but I was questioning my faith. I prayed the hardest I had ever prayed in my life. I knew the Bible talks about God not giving signs, but I was really torn up and asked for one anyway. The country I was in, you couldn't drink the water, but one night I wasn't thinking and brushed my teeth with tap water. The next day, we went into a cave where they said there had been human sacrifices. My dad decided on a kind of impromptu exorcism to get rid of the evil spirits or demons or whatever. So we're all standing in a circle holding hands, and the first of my Montezuma's revenge farts slips out, and it was rank, deadly, but silent. Nobody knew it was me. My dad smells it. Remember, we're in a cave. The fart has nowhere to escape to. We have to just marinate in it, and get super excited. The Bible says an exorcised spirit will leave behind the smell of brimstone. We really accomplished something here today. And that was my sign. I had suspected for a while that my dad was semi-crazy and willing to interpret anything to reinforce his religious beliefs, and he confirmed it for me then. That was 15 years ago. I've been an atheist ever since. This is cross-posted from another sub. So, when succulents became the craze, I bought a few. I panicked because they weren't happy and overwatered all of them. The pots I had didn't have proper drainage either. The poor things all drowned. Around the same time, changes were made at work, nursing home, that made it very hard to properly care for everyone. One of the people affected was Flash Gordon, not his real name. He was dying, and he was my friend. He made me promise not to quit until after he died, as I was the only one patient enough with his grumpy ass. When he passed, I couldn't stop crying at work. Someone grabbed this little guy from his room and began overwatering it at the nurse's station. I then decided that since I couldn't save Flash, I'd save the succulent. Almost a year passes. I've stayed and kept all my promises, but I'm miserable. Administration doesn't do shit, and people are suffering. I'm no longer effective because my mental health is severely suffering. I didn't want to abandon them, and I was ready to set myself ablaze to keep them warm. Finally, I asked the universe for a sign that I should leave. The next morning I wake up and this little guy had a huge stalk I apparently hadn't noticed. There were blossoms all throughout. A tear ran down my cheek. I thanked Flash, and put in my 2 weeks. Best decision I ever made. I have a wonderful job, a baby on the way, and peace. Ask the universe for a sign of my level of intelligence after a failed test everyone passed. Saw a billboard about autism care like 4 minutes after.